Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Travel, the September edition. I think we should probably think of changing the name at this point.
Again, we never promised every week in travel. We only promised this week in travel.
My name is Gary Arndt, and that beautiful voice you hear providing justification for not recording is Chris Christensen. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. We tried to record last week. It just didn't work out.
Sometimes that happens. With us again, as usual, is the beautiful Jen Leo. How are you doing, Jennifer?
It is so great to see you guys again. Feel like long-lost buddies at this point.
I know, I think we're like an old married couple, and we've been doing this so long now that we just, the spark is completely gone. We're just like, we don't care.
But not for our guests.
That is true. I think it's the first time in the show. He's the man behind the blog Whiskey Tango Globetrot. Please welcome Spencer Spellman. How are you doing?
Thanks, awesome, guys. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go through a couple of news stories. I thought this is kind of an interesting one, and you guys pointed out. So there was a crash, I think it was last week, or it was recently in Dubai. And
yeah, I think it's a little longer ago than that. But
one of the survivors won $1 million in a lottery. This guy has a horseshoe up his butt. I mean, I think he should start base jumping and doing all kinds of stuff because this guy is obviously very, very lucky.
He had bought the ticket before he got on the flight. I don't know what it means when you buy an airline ticket and then get on a flight and it crashes, though. Is that really, really lucky, or is that some combination of good and bad luck evening out? So,
well, let's not forget he's 62 years old, and I absolutely love this story because I believe in this stuff. I believe in luck. If I say good luck to you, I am not blowing you off. I absolutely believe in luck, and I'm wishing you good luck. And this guy is proof it happens in big ways.
If I say good luck, I'm just being sociable. It's one of those things you say, I really don't mean it because
you don't really want us to have good luck, is what you're saying.
It's not that I don't want it, it's just that it's chance. And if I believed in it, I would gamble, and I don't gamble because I have a degree in math. And I know the odds are stacked against me, and I don't know why I would do that.
Gary, that's so boring.
Boring? Truth is boring. Don't know what to say.
Your two co-hosts here both have degrees in math or applied math, so.
Oh, all right. But you're more genteel about it, Chris.
I am, well, in everything than Gary, yes. I think that'd be fair to say. I like the story, but as a tech nerd, I like the story about the new hot phone. The hottest phone on the market right now is the Samsung 7,
next, yeah.
Which is such a hot phone that the FAA has now banned it.
It's blowing up.
It's blowing up. That's right.
I don't know if you so this the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 that just came out is starting on fire in some cases, and I just saw last night on the news there was one that left their phone, this new Galaxy Note 7, in their car charging while they went inside, and it started on fire, and they came out and they were showing photos of their SUV just completely in flames. Like, crazy. It started on fire, the car caught on fire, and yeah. So.
Well, and the interesting thing with this is it's not like everyone is, although they have been recalled and you should return yours. There's no question about that. Because they're saying, Samsung I think is saying 0.1% of the phones, or maybe it's even 0.01%. It's a small percentage of the phones, but when you sell over 1 million phones, it works out to thousands of these phones will catch fire if you don't return them. Which is just amazing. So now the FAA, just today, we caught this just before we started, has told passengers not to use them on planes, not to charge them on planes, and not to put them in your carry-on luggage. They're basically banning the Note 7 from planes.
Can somebody explain to me how the fire process works? If the phone sparks, how does the whole rest of the car catch on fire?
Because they get really hot. They really, really get hot, and so it catches combustible material in the phone, or and the FAA's concern is in the plane on fire. They get to, I don't remember what temperature, but really very hot. Basically, if you charge a the battery technology used in the phones too fast, they get really warm. And I don't know if you've ever noticed your phone get really warm when it's charging.
Yes.
There's all sorts of circuitry in the phone to make sure that it can get warm, but not too warm. And apparently there's a flaw in this particular phone design that charges too fast and stresses the batteries, and therefore, in some cases, they will have a catastrophic failure. And we've seen that before in phones, but this is, I think, the largest recall of one of the most major phones, and very, very bad timing for them because, of course, this came out almost the day before or the 2 days before the Apple announced their new iPhone. So real bad, double whammy for Samsung.
I have an iPhone, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I think it's happened to me once or twice where my phone got so hot, and it was usually when I was outdoors in the sun, where the phone will shut down, and it will give you a message saying, your phone's too hot, we're shutting it down.
Cool off your phone, stupid, is what I think my phone tells me.
Yeah, I think I had that happen to me when I was in Cambodia.
Hey, Spencer, you can feel free to chime in. We're not just waiting to talk to you till the middle. This is kind of like coffee chat, chit-chat, headlines.
Love it.
Speaking of which, what kind of phone do you guys use?
Well, I just ordered an iPhone 7, although I really wanted to order a 7 Plus with the new camera, with the new dual camera that's on there, but the size is just too darn big for me.
Explain the dual camera. I haven't heard about this yet.
They have a new system on the iPhone 7 Plus, which I think actually would be interesting for travelers because, you're talking about a phone that sort of fits in your pocket. It's the large end of a cell phone range. Too large for me.
I have the 6 Plus, and it fits just fine.
It's exactly the same size as the 6 Plus.
Yeah.
But the new one has two cameras. One is basically a telephoto. Now, it's only a 2x telephoto. But so they're doing two things. One is they have a better, if you zoom up to 2x, you get an optical zoom instead of a digital zoom, so you get better zooming. And so they put in a control that lets you zoom up to 10x, and the zooming should be better. It's got more pixels, plus it's got this digital. Then they're also using the two cameras to give you, because you've got more control, they're doing a software depth of field so that you can get portrait photos, for instance, with the background that is what am I trying to say? Not in focus. And they're doing it in software rather than doing it by changing the focal length of the lens, because there's only so much you can do with these little tiny cameras in terms of getting depth of field. So it looks pretty darn cool. I really wanted to get it, but I just don't like the size.
When is it coming out? The 7 Plus.
It went on sale this morning at midnight. So.
I have this 6.
We will be talking more about this later in the show.
Later in the show, okay.
Okay.
Another news thing, and this was actually very interesting from theobserver.com. They talked about what those scribbles on your boarding pass mean when you go through TSA. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who kind of wondered what the purpose of them were, what they meant, why. And, the answer they give is it might be the initials of the officer. But at the same time, if you have a boarding pass without scribbles, it doesn't seem to matter.
Right. So the best story in there was basically that the officers are supposed to initial it so that if something were to happen, they would know who to blame. And then they said some of the officers intentionally are illegible because they don't want to be blamed in case anything goes wrong. But I did love the one. Jen, you need to go back to all your boarding passes that you've kept. I'm sure you have a drawer full, right? And look to see whether any of the officers wrote their phone numbers on there, because apparently at least one officer admitted that he's been known to do that. So
that's excellent. As long as it doesn't happen on my daughter's boarding pass.
Not yet. Those days.
I would like to take this opportunity to gripe about something which is similar, not quite the same. I took a trip the other week to Saskatchewan. I went up to Prince Albert National Park. And as I was boarding my flight in Minneapolis, the agent at the front desk put my baggage claim, and he stuck it to the back of my passport. Like the whole baggage claim thing was adhesive. And I've had this happen a couple other times. Sometimes it's a security tag they put on it. And I just got this passport, and hopefully, it'll. Granted, for me, it probably won't last 10 years, but it's supposed to last 10 years. Why are they sticking stuff and defacing passports, which are official documents? Why do they ever do this at all? I'm completely flummoxed by why anybody would do this.
Hey, Grouchy, I've had that happen to me before too, and they've only stuck it on the back. They haven't stuck it. For me, they didn't stick it on the precious inner pages. It was just on the back.
No, it's on the back, but still, it's gunking it up, and you got this.
Did you have a paper boarding pass, or were you using?
I did.
Okay, interesting. Because usually they'll put it on the back of the boarding pass, which makes perfect sense.
I know.
I've never had that happen before. I mean, for me, it's always been they either hand it to me or they just kind of put it on the back of the boarding pass.
Yeah, that's what I'm used to.
But sometimes, especially outside of the U.S., you have to go through a set of security questions just before the gate, and they will put a sticker on the back of your passport indicating that you had gone through this, just a tiny sticker. And that also kind of ticked me off as well, because that could also go on the boarding pass. I don't know. That's just my rant for the week.
As rants go, wasn't your best.
Instagram, very popular app. I'm sure all of us use it. Melina Roberge, is that how you pronounce her name, was photographing images from her trip around the world. And it turns out she was smuggling $30 million worth of cocaine into Australia. So the lesson here, folks, if you're going to Instagram your trip, don't be smuggling drugs. And if you're going to be smuggling drugs, for God's sakes, don't Instagram your trip. You Snapchat it. It disappears after 24 hours. That's what Snapchat's for.
And all the cool drug smugglers are using Snapchat these days. So, Gary, have you ever run into being a nomad and having usually it used to be a nomad. I guess you've got a place now, but did you ever run into the suspicion that you might be doing something like this? How are you paying for your travel?
I have not, but it's a concern because kind of in the back of your mind, do you remember the Bridget Jones' Diary or whatever, where someone put something in her luggage and then she gets arrested for it?
Yeah.
I think that's always kind of a concern. Like, what if you get, it could be someone just asking for a bribe when you enter a country.
Right. And
they could accuse you of something like that, like smuggling in drugs. It's never happened to me, and it may due to the fact that I'm kind of older than a lot of, maybe if you're in your 20s or something, it might be something that you might raise a red flag for.
But I've got the profile for that.
You what?
So I fear the profile for that.
Hot and younger?
As a drug dealer?
I wasn't saying, let's not get too carried away now. My mom actually thought that that's how I paid for my travel. Like, she didn't understand what I did years ago to be able to travel like I did, so she actually thought that I was like,
a kingpin?
Yeah, essentially.
There was a short period of time where I was officially an air courier.
Ooh, I remember those days.
Now, I don't think I ever took a trip, but it was one of those things where you signed up for the air courier program, and I didn't have enough time off, and that really kind of, with 9/11 and the increase in security, I think a lot of those programs went away, at least in terms of random people like me, being able to. Basically, you used to carry on, and then they took your luggage. And the thing in the back of your mind is, you never would see what you were carrying, and it's like, how do I know that this is some medical equipment or some technical thing that needs to get there, rather than something that's going to end me up in a prison?
I don't know if you remember Mitch Hedberg, the comedian.
Yeah.
He had a joke. It's like, I like the UPS guy because he's a drug dealer and he don't even know it. Let's go to one more news story. This is from Travel Mole. Syria has launched an Always Beautiful tourism campaign. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you could go to Syria right now. Despite of all the stuff in the news, it is possible to go there. And there are parts of Syria that are relatively safe compared to the rest of Syria, I guess.
Not that it's a big country and you're that far from where a lot of people are dying. And I just read the stat that 11 million people have left Syria. So there shouldn't be crowds. So that's the other good news about going to Syria on your vacation. It's amazing to me that they have a tour that they have or even bothered doing a tourism campaign, because they're getting a lot of free publicity. So.
Well, the interesting thing is that in 2011 it had 8 million visitors a year.
Oh yeah.
And 2013 it was down to under 500,000.
But still a 500,000.
Well, I think that when it counts visitors, it counts anybody going in and out of the country.
Sure.
So there's still commerce going on.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Transportation, things like that. People who may live in Syria who, let's say they live in Damascus or a major city, who fly in and out. So you always get those sort of things. That's why you're never going to see a country that gets zero tourism, because they always count that sort of travel as part of it.
Unless it's like Albania in the 60s or something like that. That locks its borders.
I was just in Albania. I found it actually quite nice.
It's a little more welcoming now than it was when we were younger.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that big of a deal at all.
As we talked to Spencer, the first question I've got for you, Spencer, is I've given a lot of travel bloggers a hard time about choosing the name for their blog as 3 random words. Meet, plan, go see, do. You're actually the only person I know who actually really did seem to use 3 completely random words that don't even seem to relate to travel.
Right? Yeah.
It's a play on words. I get it.
Yeah, that was like I wanted to do something, because I feel like a lot of blog names is just kind of something to do with how they're traveling in that season of their life, that moment, or it's their name. And I was trying to think of something that was going to be clever, that people were going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh, that's kind of a fun play on words, and like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, but Whiskey Tango Globetrot. So I wanted something that people would remember and not forget, because there's so many travel blogs out there, and blogs and websites, and wanted to be, I guess, a little bit more memorable than your token website or blog. I don't know if I actually am or not, but try to at least be somewhat memorable.
It worked for me, Spencer.
Awesome, love it.
Just 3 random words for me. Sorry.
Well, I got it immediately.
Great, love it, Gary. Thanks, man.
So, what are you up to now?
So I have, I feel like I've kind of had this evolution in travel the last few years. Where I actually started in the travel industry 8 years ago now as a writer and editor for a travel guide publisher, and as you guys and everyone knows, travel guide publishing is not exactly where it's at these days with content. So I've launched a travel blog a number of years ago, and have recently in the last year or two shifted to be more of a more lifestyle. Still, travel is still the cornerstone of what I'm doing. My website is more food and drinks in addition to travel. I think what's interesting, especially most of my audience is U.S. based, especially West Coast based, because that's where I've lived the last number of years. And I wanted to have a resource and a website where when people aren't traveling, because in the U.S., as we all know, we don't get a lot of vacation time. So what are people doing how are they spending their time the rest of the year? And I think travel, food, and drinks are some of the best things the world has given us, and wanted to kind of create a place where I could cover and have a resource for people to kind of feel like they're traveling, kind of armchair traveling, but from home, and by having food recipes, and I do a lot of stuff with craft beer, cocktail recipes, and so that's kind of how I've shifted the direction of my website in the last year or two.
And you have a great following on your newsletter, don't you, Spencer?
Yeah, it's great. That's been it's funny, like newsletter and just search is how a lot of people have found me over the years, and and so I've tried to be kind of. It's funny. I mean, I felt we kind of forget that still, even with social media and Snapchat, Instagram, and all these great in-the-moment tools, like still people, we communicate and we digest info through email, and so that's kind of been one of my main objectives, kind of building that email list.
Well, one thing I've seen, I don't know if you found this as you shifted more into lifestyle, most Americans especially, which is your audience, travel, let's say 2 weeks a year, and I think that's actually generous. I think what the stats from Expedia that I saw recently were, I think, 10 days a year. You used to work with them. You may remember that. But on the other hand, the rest of the time, they are doing things like looking for recipes, or they're talking about craft brews. I mean, that is a 52-week-a-year sort of thing. So I find that a lot of people who are lifestyle bloggers who blog about travel in and amongst everything else, if you actually look at what their most popular post is, it's a chili recipe. It's not the last trip they did to Singapore or something like that, just because there are a lot more people out there looking for non-travel content.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's cool too. I mean, especially with just how food and drink has evolved the last few years, and especially just evolved in tourism too, where there's like this drink tourism, especially beyond just wine, that didn't exist a few years ago, just because of the growth and evolution of craft beer and distillery, and craft cocktail bars, and great cities for those. And so it's amazing kind of how that's kind of even evolved in the travel world as well. But so that's kind of what I've tried to kind of create, is just a resource that people aren't just going to come to my website twice a year when they're planning their one vacation they're doing, but there's actually some info that they can kind of continue to be coming for, and just really be a resource for everything they're interested in.
What are your favorite beverages that you found around the world that are not beer or wine?
What's so interesting is that there's just like some really fascinating beverages that I've found. Like in Japan, there's this. It was in Okinawa actually. There's this distilled rice wine they made. They put it's called habushu, and they actually put one of their native. I think it's actually the habu snake. They actually put a deceased snake in the spirit, because they believe that if you drink this spirit with the snake in there, that you get all of these kind of qualities and characteristics of of the snake or whatnot. And so you have like just really funny and interesting things like that, where you're not going to find that stuff on a supermarket shelf.
What are the qualities of a sea snake that I want?
So longevity.
Okay.
Also, they can mate for up to 24 hours at a time, and so evidently that's one of the traits that they believe can be translated to you if you drink that.
Well, then they should put like my fingernail clippings in the drink if they want the essence of that.
Well, some of that stuff, though, I don't quite understand. I know in Asia, for instance, that one of the problems we've got with rhinoceroses is that there's a belief that the rhino's horn is an aphrodisiac, but the rhino is an endangered species, so it's not working that well for the rhino, is all I'm thinking. So, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I had a presentation I gave the other night to a group here in Minneapolis, and I bought some bottles of Spanish cider, because the cider, especially from the north of Spain, the Basque Country, one of my favorite drinks that I've discovered in the course of traveling, and I had to really search to find a place locally that sold this stuff, because it's very hard to find. And I found a liquor store that sells it, and I bought some a couple months ago, and I went back the other day, and now they have like a whole section for cider and a lot more varieties from Europe. So I was really, really happy. That's one of the great things I found traveling. And the other was sparkling sake. You don't see that much, but it's amazing.
With the cider, is that in the Gaelic region? Because I know cider's big in Ireland also. In fact, I enjoy that because I'm not a beer drinker.
Everything along that Atlantic coast.
Interesting.
Up in the north. Yeah, it's
I liked, and I don't even remember if I can remember the name of the drink. Not an alcoholic drink, but in Istanbul, there's a drink that's made with I don't know whether it's malt or something like that. It's almost more like a milk-based drink. I think it's Simit or something like that. That I thought was just fabulous, just delicious. Went and found some of the powder to come home with it.
there are also some drinks I've had that are pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an excellent question. All right, Spencer, what was the worst tasting drink that you've had that was not beer or wine?
There's I'm trying to think. The name, in Costa Rica, they had this very clear spirit. I think it's called Guarano, and it's just this.
Right.
Yeah, it's like this Everclear, and you'll. That's the closest thing I can relate it to, and they'll pour you a shot of it, give you a salt shaker and a lime, so kind of similar to tequila, but it's just like so strong and just like really doesn't have any taste to it, and so that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, there's a whole collection of those in the Mediterranean too, grappa or raki or those sort of things that just don't do anything for me.
Yeah.
Branca from Argentina is horrible. Last year I was in Haiti, and I visited a kind of a backwoods rum distillery, and I had some rum that came right from the still. Like they dripped it just like a kind of a moonshine spiraling type thing. And that was basically like drinking gasoline. The moment it touched my lips, I've never had spit anything out of my mouth before, but I literally had to. And I was sorry if I offended the guys that were making it. But normally when you have a rum or a spirit like that, they distill it. Or I'm not distill it, but they will filter it, right? And this was completely unfiltered. And it is, you have to be such a degenerate alcoholic to be drinking this stuff. Because there is no joy that came from it at all.
Gary, I wish we had that on video.
I had a wine actually in California recently, not at a famous or award-winning winery, but one in Carmel Valley that they usually say, this wine has, can you smell the apricots and can you smell the vanilla and the black cherry? I am smelling black cherry in this, and I smell none of that. I have a pretty lousy nose functionally anyway, but this winery actually had two wines that I actually could taste what they were talking about, or actually could smell this. Unfortunately, one of them, the aftertaste was kerosene. The other one was vanilla, which was, at least a pleasant taste, but it was overpowered. It was a Chardonnay that basically tasted like vanilla Chardonnay, which is different.
When you do a wine tasting like that, just make stuff up. Just like, vanilla and cinnamon. Oh, black currant. That's always a good one because nobody knows what black currant is. There's hints of black currant in it, and people will just be like, oh, yeah, and then, oh, yeah, I can taste it too, because it's all kind of BS.
Well, I think it would be better to name, exotic fruits that you've had other places that people wouldn't know. This elderberry or huckleberry.
Hints of durian.
Durian.
There's a little bit of rambutan in that.
That's right. That's right.
Long Kong.
Because then they would feel left out, too.
Yeah.
Hey, Spencer, have you done any nano brewery, craft brewery adventuring in San Diego?
I have. It's of all the places that I've spent time in the U.S., I mean, San Diego is my favorite, probably favorite place for a craft beer. I mean, even last night I was at, so I actually just this summer moved to Reno area in northern Nevada, and they had one of my favorite beers from San Diego on draft there, Alpine, which is actually in the town of Alpine, just outside of San Diego, but still, just like that portion of Southern California, just the quality of beer is amazing. Some of the experiences, like there's this one, maybe you're familiar with, I think they're actually based out of North San Diego, but they do these craft beer tours in this old open-air Swiss military vehicle, and You get in the hotel, you go to like 3 or 4 different breweries and like this really old, huge, old Swiss military vehicle, which is awesome. I love like any unique experiences like that, and especially in San Diego, which I think is, there, Portland, Denver are definitely some of the best beer cities in the U.S.
One of the things I found talking to a lot of destinations, I think it's true roughly globally, but certainly within the U.S., every place in America now claims to be a foodie destination and has an amazing craft beer scene.
Yeah.
And they have a winery.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of them shouldn't,
everywhere.
in my experience. But
No. And to a certain extent, it's true. I do think the quality of food has gotten better in a lot of places.
I agree.
But I just don't know how much of a calling card it is that people are going to go to Des Moines for the food scene.
Well, there's a class. There are definitely some travelers who do. When I was working at TripAdvisor up in the Palo Alto office with the mobile team, one of the people I worked with literally was planning his trip to France around the Michelin star restaurants. And his weekends off were up at the French Laundry or all the, and that is not me, but I was really interested to see that there is a small segment, I think, of travelers that's it, that's what they travel for. I would never imagine, if you're pitching me a show for Amateur Traveler, you better have something more than just a food scene. I want to have some site that anchors it, a national park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a museum, or something interesting to do, because I can't eat, despite looking at me, you may suspect I can't eat all day. I can do pretty well, but I can't eat all day.
I can eat all day in Charleston. We had to cut back on our restaurant shopping in Charleston. We used to do 3 meals a day trying to get to all the new ones, and we had to cut back to 2.
Yeah, when Jen and I did a show on Charleston, I had to provide the historic context, and Jen provided all the restaurants. So it was a good team.
Great combo.
Well, actually, and speaking of things to drink and Charleston, I'll save that for the tip. Never mind. I got a tip.
We can do another Charleston show.
On a semi-related note about Michelin 3-star restaurants, the #1 restaurant in the world is in Girona, El Cellar de Can Roca. I think it's been named #1 restaurant in the world 2 or 3 times now.
Ooh, good for Johnny.
The problem is it is very difficult to get a reservation. I think they're booked over a year in advance. So next year, supposedly, I don't know if it's official yet, but supposedly the SATW convention is going to be in Madrid. So I was thinking of booking a reservation at El Cellar de Can Roca, take the high-speed train from Madrid, have dinner, which we'd have to reserve like now, and have dinner at the best restaurant in the world. I thought that would be interesting.
I would like to go, Gary, but I don't know if I have enough followers to make your cut.
I see. I would rather find some little hole in the wall local place in Madrid. So,
Chris, why can't we do both?
I understand what you're saying, but I've never eaten at a restaurant like that, and it's something that you do once in your life, maybe a couple times, to say that you did it. So that's the reason I would want to do it.
Gary,
and
how much is it? Is it like
Yeah.
a $600 dinner, a $2,000 dinner? What are we talking?
Per person?
Yes, per person.
I think, I don't know, but it's in the range of like $200 to $300.
Okay, that's actually quite reasonable for that level of restaurant.
I can do that.
It is. If you go to a tasting restaurant in Vegas from a celebrity chef, you're looking at $350 just to get in before drinks.
Yeah, I don't see the value in that.
Well,
I think the most I've ever spent, and it was an anniversary dinner, was $100, $150 a person. And with that, you got ice sculptured swans with candles in them with your sorbet. I mean, there was great presentation too.
Wow, that's just like a really, really good dinner at Nobu.
Yeah, nope. I'd rather go find the hole in the wall burrito joint.
All right, well, I want one of each. I want one with you, Chris, and I want the fancy schmancy brag-worthy restaurant.
Well, see, brag-worthy,
Gary?
I'm going down to San Diego and then over to do some volunteer travel in Tijuana coming down at the end of the month. You come with me, help build houses, and I'll take you to a great carnitas place in downtown Tijuana.
I would love to do that if my PTA schedule will allow for it. I'm pretty much not allowed to do anything anymore. But
I have a friend I have a friend who is vegan, right? She is vegan or vegetarian? I think she's vegan. 364 days a year. The day she is not is the day she goes to this carnitas place, hole in the wall place in Tijuana, because she can't be a vegan at that place.
You know how someone is a vegan?
How someone is a vegan?
You know how? No, you don't. They'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Hey, Spencer, you kind of snuck in there that you recently moved to Reno. That's an interesting choice.
We're assuming witness relocation program?
It was actually, yeah. Absolutely.
But I want you to tell us about some of your favorite places and hotspots of Reno, because I'm sure that the average person doesn't know the gems of Reno.
Yeah, it's. I think Reno is just. I kind of compare it to, I feel like, where in Austin or Portland was a number of years ago, maybe more recently, like in Oakland, where people kind of think of it just as a casino destination and just gambling here, and that being where the restaurants and bar scene and all. But that's such a. I think it's such a small part of Reno. So I live in Midtown, which is really kind of the neighborhood in town. And you can walk to there's my favorite craft beer shop is also a craft beer pub that has rotating craft beer handles. You can go in there and get very local beer that comes from anywhere from Northern Nevada, Reno area, all the way down to San Diego. 2 blocks down from that, you've got Chapel, which is, in my opinion, probably the best craft cocktail bar. You've got the quality of cocktails there for $10, $11, $12 that you'd find at the best cocktail bars in New York City or in LA that would typically be $15.
And Spencer, excuse my ignorance, what's the difference between a cocktail bar and a craft cocktail bar? Are they making their own liquor? Because everybody makes their own cocktails.
I probably I probably say the word craft more than any other word I use. I feel like I just describe anything that's better than, like, I mean, a cocktail bar. If I go to like a cocktail bar, I'm just kind of going in there getting
rum and coke,
gin and tonic, rum and coke, whiskey and ginger. Craft cocktails, they typically have they have their own custom menu where they're making. Well, you can do that stuff. They have their own menu of custom cocktails that they're making there with their bartenders and mixologists that are unique to that spot. Beyond those, there's one of my favorite new spots in Reno. It's called The Basement, and it's in the downstairs of the 1933 post office, and it's kind of like a mini Chelsea Market or Grand Central Market in LA. It's located in the basement, as the name presumes, but is this open space that has a coffee shop, a juicery. They have a bunch of different boutique shops that are use locally made products. They have a salad bar that just went in there, and then upstairs just put downtown Reno's first retail store. West Elm, it's the first retail store to come to downtown Reno in almost 30 years. So you have just some really unique places like that. There's and there's a lot of chefs that are moving back to Reno that are potentially were part of Reno, but maybe grew up in Reno, but were executive chefs in cities around the world. There's a guy that was a chef in Tuscany for about 20 years, but was from Reno. He just moved back to Reno and opened up this great Italian place called Califuria, which is also in Midtown, and is this kind of Tuscany with Orno Italian restaurant. So you have a lot of just unique food and drink things that, obviously, I mean, like we said, there's a food and craft drink scene like in every city right now, but definitely kind of seeing that kind of growing in an upward trend of that in Reno.
What do you have scheduled for upcoming trips?
So I actually just got back from every year I actually try to do a coastal trip up the California coast, and just got back from Big Sur. So did Big Sur for a few days, and now going to actually taking a little family trip, meeting my family in a couple weeks in Orange Beach, Alabama. I feel like the Gulf of Mexico beaches get kind of overlooked for a lot of the Florida beaches. So I'm spending some time in Orange Beach, Alabama, and then planning a trip to Southern Africa, mostly in South Africa. I'm doing a food and drink tour of the Western Cape area. Most people think of Stellenbosch and the wine country in South Africa, but doing a craft beer, craft spirits tour. I've got tour of Western South Africa. I also have a friend that owns a distillery there, Jorgensen's Distillery. I'm going to spend some time with them as well.
Excellent. All right, then. Anything more for Spencer before we move on to our picks of the week?
Not that I can think of, and we've lost Jen or trying to bring her back on. We'll see how much luck we have with that.
All right. Well, as we wait for that, I will start things out, and my pick this week is the previously mentioned iPhone 7, but I want to talk about something else.
Not the 7 Plus?
Well, yes. Well, actually, no, this would apply to both phones. The size of the 7 Plus, I just want to say, once you get it and you use it for a day or two, you will wonder how you ever used a smaller phone. Because I got the 7 Plus, and it was awkward at first, but once I used it for a little bit, I will never get a smaller phone again, because it's just so much nicer to have that extra screen size. But anyways, what I want to point out about the iPhone 7 is that you are now going to be able to save your images as RAW files. Right. It will save it as Adobe DNG, which means that all of the information captured on the sensor, all the highlights and all the shadows, is going to be available to you for editing, which means that you should be able to get much better photos. If you can't upload to Facebook or whatever as a DNG file, you'll have to save it then as a JPEG. But for the purposes of editing, it really, really, really improves the quality of your images. So if you don't really care about that sort of stuff, you can put on JPEG and it'll just be like it was normal. I assume that's even going to be the default setting. But for people that care a little bit more about the quality of their photos, and if you probably do want to get an iPhone 7, I would also be making sure that you use the native RAW features in the phone. I think there are some Android phones that have let you do that for a while, but this is a first for Apple, and should be a big improvement. And that's my pick this week. Chris, what do you got?
Well, since we're talking about both Charleston and craft breweries and distilleries, when I say two places, if you happen to be in the Charleston area, and Jen, I assume you've been to both of these. One is the only tea plantation that I know of in the United States is just outside of Charleston, and you should go, if only to see how tea is actually made. But we really enjoyed going out there to the tea plantation, which is near Charleston. It's done very differently in Charleston because they do it in a more automated fashion than you would find if you went to Sri Lanka or someplace like that. But very interesting to see that process. And then some of that tea goes to nearby vodka distillery that is used basically to make a sweet iced tea vodka. They make other vodkas as well, but there's the name. I'll look up the name of the vodka distillery. But both of those were really fun stops when we were in Charleston.
Yay. Well, I'll do my tips really quickly if I don't get kicked off again. I don't know why I was getting kicked off. Behind door number 1, back to what we were talking about with air couriers, there is a site that I reviewed and an app that I reviewed on my WebBuzz column earlier this summer called Air Mule. And with Air Mule, you can carry and ship legal goods back and forth between the U.S. and Asia was mostly where they're at. They have a few other international destinations. Basically, you tell them what your paid flight is, and it's a peer-to-peer app where if somebody sees that you're coming to their city, they will ask you to bring them something. So say somebody wants me to bring, I don't know.
Drugs.
It can't be drugs, but like maybe a digital printer or a camera or
Okay.
stuff like that. But they pay you. And so on the app, you can negotiate the rate, give or take, with these people. And people are off cutting the cost of their flights or their trips because they are actually working with their extra baggage. Just like the old air couriers, you could get a cheaper ticket. This one is actually, I think, a monetary transaction.
Interesting.
And then behind door number 2, I recently went to Laguna Beach. You would have thought that I'd been to Laguna Beach, having been born in San Diego and the age that I am now, but I have never been. And I went last week, and it was amazing. The beaches there were so clear. There's a really, really fancy resort called the Montage Resort, probably around $700 or $800 a night, and the beach at the bottom of the resort is also public. And so Cora and I went there and checked out the tide pools, and they had tide pool educators there ready to help out the kids and pass out a pamphlet of what they were seeing and point out different creatures. And it was just beautiful. I couldn't believe how clear the water was, and I told Cora we're going to come back and go snorkeling there. It was such good quality water. So there you go, Laguna Beach.
The names, by the way, of the 2 places that I was trying to remember were the Charleston Tea Plantation and the Firefly Distillery.
I have not been to the Firefly Distillery. Good tip, Chris.
You would enjoy it.
Jen, also in San Diego, if you go to Cabrillo National Monument, they will have tidal pools there and Park Service rangers that will do a similar service.
Thank you, Gary.
And great views of the city, too.
Yes.
My dad and my grandparents are buried out there, so it's a lovely view, but it's like, oh, death, grief. Tide pools might turn it around for me.
Spencer, do you got anything for us this week?
Yeah, I will give you a Reno Tahoe tip. I obviously wouldn't be living here if I didn't love it here, but just recently visited the town of Fallon, which is about an hour outside of Reno, just off Highway 50, the loneliest highway in America. And there's this distillery there called Frey Ranch, and it's actually one of a handful of estate distilleries in the world, which means all the spirits that they make there, everything comes from what they farm there on the farm, and they're 5th-generation farmers there on this property. They have a gin, a vodka. They have an absinthe they're doing. They're doing a few, working on some whiskeys. So if you're ever in the area or on the West Coast and see a bottle of their spirits, definitely pick it up. And then if you're ever in the Reno, Tahoe area, definitely take a trip down there. They do tastings and tours on the weekends. So check them out, Frey Ranch.
Frey Ranch. And what's your favorite spirit, Spencer?
Bourbon. I grew up in the South, and so that's every night, every other night, I'll at least have a little sip on a bourbon in my whiskey cabinet for sure.
And do you have a favorite brand?
Probably Four Roses. They're out of Kentucky. I think for the value, it's just a fantastic whiskey. I mean, you can go to a lot of bars and you'll see a bottle of that. It's going to be maybe a couple dollars more than what you'd be paying for like Jim Beam or Wild Turkey or something like that. So it's just a really fantastic bourbon, and it's great value.
Excellent. All right, then let's wrap things up. Chris, what's new in the Amateur Traveler this week?
We just did a show last week with Danger Jill Robinson talking about Napa and Sonoma. It was extensive. She has quite a lot of knowledge about that. I think we ended up with 79 different links to different restaurants, hotels, museums, state parks, and such in the area.
The ultimate guide.
Well, you can't. I don't know that you can do an ultimate guide to Napa and Sonoma. For one thing, it changes so constantly, and two, I think there are 600 different wineries in just those 2 valleys.
Wow.
And they only make, and this is something I learned from Jill, they only make, I think it's less than 5% of the wine that comes from California, even though it's the best known wine region in California.
Wow.
Some of the best wine, but not the vast majority of it.
Quality, not quantity.
Yes.
Jen, where can people find you online?
Well, I took a break from social media over the summer, so I need to get back into it. I'm on Twitter at @JenLeo, and you can find me online, latimes.com/travel for my WebBuzz column, and I'm also still writing for San Diego regional hotspot newsy stuff at yournorthcounty.com.
Okay, and Spencer, where can people find you online?
Find me on my website, whiskeytangoglobetrot.com, or best social media channels would be Twitter or Instagram, and it's just my first and last name, Spencer Spellman.
And as usual, you can find me all over the internet, especially on Instagram now. They just launched Instagram Stories, and even though I pretty much hate Snapchat, I've been using that a little bit when I'm on the road because it's Instagram, and I'm already using it, so I might as well. So you can check me out there at Everything Everywhere. And until next time, get out there and try some spirits and some drinks and some food in different places around the world.